Hello, everybody. Welcome to the RPA Vanguard channel. My name is Andy Menon. In this video, we are going to be continuing our discussion on implementing a solution accelerator template by looking at the reusable components. So let's get started. Normally, I do not label this section of my video as a rant. It's usually a prologue, but here's why it's a rant. If you have watched the second part of this video series, you will see that in the concluding section, I had said that we will be looking at the reusable library that will load data into data service, right? But I have a slight change of plan for this video. And the reason for that is as follows. Here, if you look at our this particular download path that's familiar to all of us by now. There is this libraries folder under the Solution Accelerator template folder, the dash dev folder, and it has a subfolder named libraries. Now, if you come into this folder of your marketplace download, you will find two other subfolders. One is the sustainability data collection reusables, and then the generic reusables, right? This is my own implementation of the data service library for the entities that I had created in the part 2 video. If you haven't already watched that, please go back and watch that video. And therefore, this library is not going to be part of your marketplace template. So you won't find it here. I have put it here so that I can easily find it right alongside the generic templates that have been included in the Solutions Accelerator download. So if you open this sustainability data collection reusables, this is what I had in mind today, right? For today's session, I wanted to take a look at this library. But, I completely forgot about, one part of it. And so if I open this library in Studio, the sustainability data collection reusables, you will see that there is this dependency named generic reusables. Now, I had completely forgotten about this. And therefore, it is important that before we dive into the data collection reusables library, we look at the generic reusables first, right? And therefore, I do not know if this entire, if these two libraries can be covered in a single session. Maybe the video is going to be too long, but I do not know. I will try to, but if I cannot, then this discussion on the reusable components of Solution Accelerator is going to be probably a two-part, discussion, right? So there will be a part 3 and there will be a part 4. So regardless of that situation, I want us to be paying attention to generic reusables because like I said in the opening video, right, the part 1 video, I'll be sharing my experiences unbiased, right? You may have something to learn from it and you may not have something to learn from it, right? But you really do not require me to, skip something that I feel is not essential and then tell you, hey, by the way, there is this generic reusables library, open it up and you will find all generic reusable methods. Now, I don't need to make a video for that, right? And I'm sure I don't need to tell you that, right? Because my audience is pretty capable of doing that themselves. Instead, no matter how small or big a component of the Solutions Accelerator template is, I have to show you some of the things that I observed and some of the things that I changed so that you get something to learn from it, right? That's what I hope. And with that, I am going to close this project down. And instead, we are going to open up the generic reusables library. All right, so I have the generic reusables library open in UiPath Studio. If you look at how this is organized, right, you will see many number of subfolders that have been created under this library, which is great because they tell you what exactly they are actually doing, right? And what I want to point out is some of the things that I saw in the documentation that have been followed here in this library, and also the other library on the data service functionality that we're going to discuss, eventually. And I just want to link a few things that I pointed out in that video to what's physically here in this library. So if I open up any one of these methods or actions and come back to the reusable components methodology document, right? This is the document that I had covered in the later part of part 1 video, right? And there are some things that I would like to point out, right? First thing is the page 4, right? If I click on this, it is going to show you this comment, right, of single responsibility principle, right? That means when you are creating a XAML flow, it should do one thing and one thing only, right? And so if I go back to the studio and look at any of these methods or actions, right, you will see that they do just one thing and one thing only, right? For example, move email does the job of just moving email, right? Nothing else. Similarly, if I open, let us say, regular expressions check, it will do one thing and one thing only, and that is to check if the expression if the string that you're passed in and the expression that you're passed in, if there is a match of that string with that expression, right? So this is how single responsibility principle is implemented, right? And that's one thing that I wanted to point out. The second item I wanted to point out on the list is on, I think, page 14. Another item that I wanted to, point out from this documentation is on the naming standard, right? And some of the things that I saw in the library, and most of them stick to this standard, but not all of them. So if I go back to the library, and if you look at most of these actions, they will have the Pascal naming standards, right? Basically, this is the Pascal naming standard, and you see that there is no in, out, or IO prefixes, right? Like we saw here in this documentation, right? The name of the argument should not contain in, out, or IO prefixes, which is true in most cases. But then, if you look at some of the other methods of this library, they really don't stick to that, right? You see that they don't stick to that. It's still used, the arguments are passed in as in and out prefixes, right? And it's up to you if you want to change it. Please go ahead and change it the way you want to, right? Then the other thing that I would want to point out is on page 18. Here is another important point. Library must throw errors when they appear, not signal them through output arguments, right? And I think we get to see that in one or more of these methods. For example, if I go into queue operations and open this file, you will see that this particular method is trying to get the attribute of a queue, right? The number of max retries from the queue that you will be creating in the orchestrator, right? So I have already created that, but this is something we are going to come back to in a later video, because these are all prerequisites of your performer and dispatcher processes. And if we go into this queue here and then look at, in case you want to see where it is, you edit this queue, and there is this max number of retries that you have set on this queue, right? And what this method does is, the method in the library does is it tries to get the max number of retries attribute of that queue, right? And if it doesn't find the queue, or if it finds multiple queues, or if it does not find that attribute for any reason, you will see that they are throwing out exceptions, right? Which means that the exception has to be handled by the caller of this of this library method, right? That's another thing that you have to kind of take note of. One additional thing that that I appreciate very much, right, on the reusability factor of a library, right, no matter how simple or complicated it is exemplified in this or demonstrated in this method, right? If we come down to get max retries and scroll down to this particular container here, right, the deserialized JSON try-catch container here, there is this expression for to assign, assign a value to the queues object. And if you open this up in your expressions editor, you will notice how verbose and, right, if not complicated, this expression is. This is just to get the name of a queue, right? You're taking the JSON object that you have pulled down from the orchestrator, and then you're filtering it on the name of the queue that you want, right? And here is where you'll appreciate this, right? If you are going to implement this method, you will have to do something like this. There might be a simpler way of doing this, but you can see that if you're fairly new to this whole process of getting properties of a queue, etc., you will have to do all the grunt work yourself. And one of the things that you will see here is in terms of the syntax of the library, that's this syntax of this particular expression that you're looking at here. This is a high effort to low return ratio, right? Because just to get a queue name, you're writing such a complex or syntactically heavy expression just to get that queue name, right? But somebody has already done that work for you. And that is where you must appreciate the reusability of a library. Somebody has taken the time, somebody at UiPath has taken the time, they have written this library and have published it for us to be used readily, right? And if you are trying to reinvent the wheel and do all the grunt work, this is the grunt work that you have to go through, most likely, right? And that's where you can really appreciate, no matter how simple or complex the library is, somebody has already put in that work. And I made it a point to put that here so that if you are downloading this library and going through this, you might look at this comment and also appreciate what I'm finding, a very good thing about the reusability of this library. The last thing that I would like to cover on this library would be the changes that I have made to it, right? And for that, we'll have to go through some of the methods that are already in this library, right? So if we go to either move email or send email, you will see that it operates within the Microsoft Office 365 scope, right? And that makes sense for someone who's operating directly in the Microsoft Office 365 space, in which case you will need your application secret, your application ID, and all the details that are required for you to operate within that scope, right? And you will see that these are inputs to this library action, and these will come from your configuration file that you will be seeing when you are working in the processor, in the performer process or the dispatcher process, right? We'll eventually get to that, but you will see that these come from there. Now, I do not have this information. I do not operate in this 365 scope, right? And therefore, I have not set up an application ID or an application secret. And many of us surely wouldn't have that either. And therefore, what I did was I implemented a more low-key method for those who are going to consume this library. And if you are going to be using a local Outlook deployment, right? Let us say that your automation is running on a robot machine, and that robot machine has got a service Outlook locally configured, in which case you can do the same thing that move email or send email is doing, by using the local Outlook, right? And in this particular case, I am not moving any emails, but I'm just sending emails, right? And I'm sending emails based on the Outlook that's been configured locally. And therefore, what I did is I copied a template and then re-implemented it as send email Outlook local. And then it's almost identical to the one if you look at the send email or move email, you will see, sorry, if you look at the send email and then compare it to send email Outlook local, you will see that they are almost identical, and they have two implementations of the send email based on what kind of email you are sending. If you're sending a text email, then you will send an email without the HTML flag checked, right? Is body HTML checked. But if in case your content is HTML, then obviously the control will come to this activity and it will send out an email with the body HTML enabled. Regardless of which method which type of content you are sending, both of these have got an additional input that comes in as arguments, and that is the attachments collection, right? It's a collection of file names, and if that attachments collection is not empty, then that gets attached to the mail item, and then the email will go out with the attachments that you would want to send to the stakeholders of this process, right? And you will see the implementation of this method when I implement the dispatcher and the performer processes. Again, I'm coming back to this topic of reusability. While I do appreciate, right? We all appreciate, how much life has become easier because someone has taken the effort to implement these libraries and these methods for us to use readily. It does not mean that we can't look at it again and see if we can enhance it any further, right? If I open up the regular expression, it's already open, so I'm going to go in here. I have added another comment that you might want to take a pause, look at, and then based on your requirements, modify this particular method. Or if you don't want the previous clients to break, or the older clients or the clients that are using the older version of this library to break, maybe you would want to add an additional new method, right? Which is a slight variation of this. The reason I say that is because if you look at the is match activity, you will see that by design, it ignores case sensitivity, right? The pattern options have been built into this method, and you are not passing it as input arguments, right? You're not passing them in. That means anything you match using this library method will be matched based on case insensitivity. But there might be use cases where you would want a case sensitive match, right? Maybe there is a pattern of part numbers or customer numbers that are alphanumeric, and you would really want to have a case sensitive match, in which case you have to add an additional argument here of type regex options, and then pass in your flags so that this particular activity can use them. Now, the risk to doing that is you will have to thoroughly check what is the impact on your clients that are using the older version, right? And if in case there is a risk that the clients will break if they upgrade their library, then you will have to make sure it is documented very well. The other method of implementation is clone this method and rename it to something new. For example, regular expression check advanced, in which case you will make the regex options mandatory, and then the clients who are using this library method, the enhanced method, can pass in those pattern options, right? The regex options that are then applied or used by this library method to run the kind of regex matching that your client would want to run, right? So there are options for you to actually look into these methods and make them better or have alternate versions of these. But you'll have to take care to document and also make sure that there is minimal impact on the clients that are already using older versions of this library, right? So once you have familiarized yourself with this, with the library and the methods, and you know what they do, it's time for you to kind of, build this library and deploy it. One other thing that I would want you to pause and think about before you do this is when you open up the vanilla library, the marketplace component has been published a while ago, right? Is it possible that you might have to upgrade some of your packages, right? And in which case you go to manage packages and then you update the packages to the latest non-preview versions, right? In my case, I set up a rule where I will be actually implementing the non-preview version. So for example, here you can see most of these that are installed are non-preview versions, right? And so based on what version of Studio you're operating and based on the compatibility, and if you're going to run into some problems, you might want to upgrade your packages and bring them to the latest versions before you start building this library and deploying it, right? So once you've done all that, you'll publish your library, and there are two options to do that. The first option, when you are publishing this library, would be to publish it to the orchestrator feed, right? Now, remember, the orchestrator has got two different kinds of feeds, right? One is the default feed, which you see here, so the orchestrator host, and then the other is your own library feed, right? Now, if you don't know how to do that, you can go over to the Automation Rocket Ship channel, and there is a complete video series on how to create and deploy UiPath marketplace components, right? I have created that video series along with my fellow MVPs, Priya and Pradeep. And in that, I demonstrate how to set up your own orchestrator library feeds so that your entire team that is connected to that orchestrator folder will get to download your custom libraries. So that's option number one. The second option is to, if you are having a small team or you are doing this yourself, is to deploy this to a local store, right? So if I go into my local store, which is on my local machine, and look for generic reusables, you will see that the generic reusables has been deployed here, right? This is accessible to me in my environment only, right? And if I go to my settings, you will see that the Andy Menon packages is set up to point to a local path. And I always deploy these to my local path. And once I test them based on the requirements, I can put it up in my orchestrator feed, right? So it's up to you on how you want to deploy this based on your development, infrastructure, how you have set up your team, and how you plan to share this library. And what I have done is I have not implemented this from version 1. And what I've done is I've continued the version number from the library that I downloaded from Solution Accelerator. That is just to make a point that this was not something that I built from ground up, but rather took something that was already built and added my own stuff into it. And then I allowed the version number to continue, right? Now that we have spent so much time on this library, right? It goes back to my original rant, right? Why did I change my plan? And why did I spend so much time on the generic reusables library, right? So for that, I'm going to switch over to this slide here, the screen grab. And I have made a layout of the components of the Solution Accelerator template, right? And when you download your Solution Accelerator template, you will see that you will get the libraries, which we have talked about. You will get the generic reusables and the sustainability reusables. And then when you go up one step and go into processes, you will see there is a performer template, and then there's a dispatcher template, right? And those are the 4 minimal components that you get in your template when you download it from the marketplace. So I've laid them out here, and we are focusing today on the Generic Reusables library. You will see that although this is a very generic library, it is significant because it is used by the dispatcher process. It is also used by the performer process, and it is also used by the other library in that solution accelerator template, right? And I showed you that at the beginning of this session, that when you open up the sustainability data collection reusables library, you will see that the generic reusables library is also a dependency. And therefore, you see all other components of this solution accelerator will call into this generic reusables library. So what's the takeaway? The takeaway is the more generic the library, a greater number of clients can use it, right? And that's what you're seeing here, right? This library has got some actions that are so generic that they can be used by the performer, the dispatcher, as well as another library, right? And that is why after I laid out these components and I looked at them, I said, you know what? It is better to pay a little more attention to this library so that we can appreciate the significance of this particular component, the generic reusables library component of the Solutions Accelerator, before we get to something else, right? So you can open up, all the other project templates in the Solution Accelerator, and you will see this library, right? So that is all for this video, and I hope you appreciate the time that we have spent on the Generic Reusables library and its significance in relationship to the other moving parts of the Solution Accelerator template. In the next video, we will be turning our attention to the data collection reusable library. And thank you. I hope that you have learned something new, and if you have done so, please do like and subscribe to my channel. I'll truly appreciate it. Thank you, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.